complain. Same goal for the game. And we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight. Cause we go way back in the day. My day lunch from back in the day. They still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain. Cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane. And go get this money with energy. I draw up the plate. And then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. And then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. And then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. And then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang.
I get the bag with the gang. Taking that Zach to the bank. And it be all in my drink. You niggas is stupid, you think that shit change? You not even hot in your gang. Ain't nothing even hot about your gang. You niggas be lying about same. Be posting them pictures of guns for the fame. Niggas just look at me different now. Say that's your man, but he a clown. Don't fuck around with the fuck arounds. Little nigga, you should cut it out. Me and my niggas take different routes. Punch a bitch nigga all in his mouth. Hold up my nigga, we different now. I need a Robert, this is my style. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I get a bitch today, she probably a foreign model. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I'm with my gang today, tomorrow never promise.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Cliff is here with me, and we're just talking about our shape mating stuff. So once we left off, we were having an error when we were trying to run our experiments on the high performance computing cluster, which is what we use to do a nice fancy supercomputer. We have to do big experiments. But Cliff, I think we decided Cliff was going to try to take a stab at rewriting the optimizer we were working with. I'll probably run that down for you guys later. But you think that worked out, Cliff?
So I ran it and I got data, and it did not look like anything failed other than the 4-hour timeouts. So it looks like everything is cool. Did you
do the 4 food types?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. And then the shape mating and snapshots. Did you do the 4 food types? Were you running with snapshots?
Yes.
Sweetness. All right. So we have some data we can check out then?
Yes, and I just did a reboot, so I'm getting.
Oh yeah. Take your time, no worries. You can screen share when you get. So those of you who don't know how shape mating works, basically we have little digital organisms. They have a world called Berry World that they run in. It's basically a map with just think of it a map where every spot has a berry, like a red berry, a blue berry, or a green berry. Each time they eat a berry, they get a score boost, which helps their fitness. But they pay a cost for switching berry types. So if they want to eat a blueberry, then eat a red berry, it's going to actually be costly. So most of the time they end up, trying to eat a particular food type. And then the females have preferences. They either prefer to mate randomly with sort of like the first male they encounter, or they have a preference for a particular color. And so female expresses a preference. So for instance, she wants red berries. She'll then have what we call as like a lek. You can think of a lek as a place where a bunch of males are congregated, and the female can go and assess which one she would prefer to mate with. And the algorithm is set so she'll attempt to mate with she'll run through a certain amount of males, whatever we set the number to. I think it's currently set to 8. And she will pick the one who has the highest score for the color berry she prefers. So basically, she'll pick the reddest male or the bluest male or the greenest male. And then what shape mating is normally we would just take our winner, we'd take them, we'd throw them in our mating chamber, and we'd pop out a new baby. But what shape mating does is there's sort of a filter in the birthing chamber. And each of these organisms now has a shape and how likely they are to successfully reproduce when they mate is determined by their shape. And you can think of it as their shape is basically a number. It's encoded by their genome, but it's a number between -1 and +1. And you have highest fecundity with with organisms of the inverse shape. So, if you're a -1 and a 1, you're going to almost always mate successfully. If you're both 1 or both -1, you're never going to be able to mate successfully. Yeah. And then if you're 0, you're just like somewhere in the middle. So basically you can think of it as like a convex shape and a concave shape fit together perfectly, and they have like really great surface area contact. 2 flat shapes are just going to slide past each other, and 2 concave or convex shapes don't share a lot of surface contact. So that's like the sort of visual model that we're working with, even though in the computer it's just numbers. But yeah, so Cliff is getting us up, and I'll have to get used to my shape mating elevator speech here. So I'll have to give it. It's kind of like Discord or Gather, where like every other week we should revisit the fundamentals of the project for the newbies. But yeah, I hope everybody's having a good day. I'll meet with Cliff till 2. I'll hop off because I have a meeting with Mike. I need to do some work and some teaching later, and some reading, and then I'll probably go live later on.
All right, I've got my files. It'll be a little bit of a rough.
Yeah, no worries. As long as we just want to make sure everything's working now, and then figure out what we want to do next.
Yeah. So, okay. Oh boy. You.
Also, I had one other thing to talk to you about before we go. It's just the cultural evolution stuff. Mike is very serious about this cultural evolution stuff.
All right. Well, we gotta have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I right now I just don't have time. I mean,
yeah.
Until after the life deadline, I just don't have time. Okay, so what I got for it, these are not going to be, well, these are going to be very meaningful to us, but
here, let me pull your screen up here.
Okay, so just to orient, this is C0 is condition 0, C1 condition 1. So we're going to be seeing C and then a number that's just the condition number. So the averages are 5 replicates. Food types, there's only one food type here. They can only eat one food. And we see that basically whether or not we do shape mating, on the basic data, we don't see any difference.
Right.
Right. As we would expect, they're going to eat all the food. It's basically the same. And they can't display a different color, so there would be nothing to select from. You're going to get.
Right. It's essentially just. There's no preference. Yeah, there's like a lek, but there's nothing really else to choose. It's either random or food type 1.
Right. There's no game to play.
Yeah.
All right. So C2. So then we have C2. Now we got two food types, and notice that before we had 0 switches. Right. The 0 switches indicates that they're preferring one type. Yeah, 2, 3. So here's 2, 3. So now we have 2 food types, and this jog down. This is just some of the replicates are running out of data, so we should probably only look up to like 60K or even 40K, or sorry, 4,000 or 6,000. Right, like out here, we just don't have all 5 replicates sitting finished, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Because we're timing out.
Okay.
You know.
Right, the 4-hour limit. All right.
So they start with they tend to go high on the switch count, and then they kind of figure that out, and that's correlated with a gain of score. I meant to plot all 4 foods. Oh, sorry, a minute. I did that plot all 4 foods. Food 1. Interesting. Oh, I see. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna do this better.
Did you plot their shapes too?
I have it, but we have to look at it separately. I don't have it here. 2, 3, 2. Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. This is just looking at like without considering too much, like what's the difference?
I mean, the main thing was you didn't get the I don't know, what was that error called?
It was a bus error.
Bus error, yeah.
Bad juju. Okay, fine. So switches is low, which indicates that they're preferring a food.
Right.
Food 1 and 2 have like the same level of consumption, and it's pretty flat. Right, there's a lot of variability. Just more stuff with shape mating on. With shape mating off, they don't achieve as high a level,
right,
and it's not flat. Right, there's more variability. So once things settle down, and like I said, after about 6,000, we're not going to consider it because we're not looking at all the reps. So actually, I can add an extra flag. So that's 2. That was conditions 2, 3, which is the 2 food conditions. So then for 5, now we are at the. Hold on a second. Dash where data. I think that's the parameter. Where range limited data. That's it. So I can plot just where all 5 reps have data. We don't have to guess that. All right. So here's 4 and 5. So this is without shape mating. Oopsie. That over there. This is 4. So this is 3 foods, no shape mating. There seems to be no preference for like food 1 versus 2 versus 3. They don't care. I'm guessing. Let's see. Yeah. So the switches, this like increase in variance has something to do with this jump up in switches, right? So we have to look at the individual replicates in order to determine what's going on. But in both cases, I mean, you could. It's only 5 reps, so like take it with a grain of salt. But like the initial behavior is quite different with or without shape mating. The time to like figure out switching. Increased switching is longer and more variable. They seem to figure it out pretty fast here. So that's interesting.
So yeah, we got to look in there and see who's selecting for who. I think we're gonna have to get organism traces, not traces, but like look at the actual individuals. We're
gonna have to do like a deep analysis. We're gonna talk about it. I've been thinking about how we're gonna analyze this stuff.
Great.
I think that we will need to go pretty deep. And then Oh, interesting. Okay. So this one looks crappy because, maybe this did cry. Okay, I'm gonna have to track this down. This is interesting. So for this one, I only have data up to update 160, which is kind of problematic.
Cliff, hang on one sec. I want to make sure nobody's here.
Okay.
All right, sorry about that.
So we have like no data here. So now I'm a little worried because I got it to run and I downloaded the data and I plotted it, but I didn't do a range thing. This is saying that one of the replicates only has 160 generations, which is not ideal.
That's exactly what was happening before, Cliff.
Yeah.
It was like almost always between 100 and 200 updates.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? We broke C++.
It's fine.
We literally broke the language. Oh my goodness. Guys, the thing that's frustrating about this code for me is that, like, I think as a program, I'm sure Cliff knows, but even I feel aware of when, you're using an exotic package or an exotic algorithm or some new feature of the language. But most of this code is written with, like, pointers, vectors, lists, and basic math.
Let's see.
I blame the pointers.
Let's see some. So we're going to do this tail. One. All right, 168,000, 160. Two of them ended at 160. That's just broken. All right, so yeah, I looked at some of them. They went to 8,000, 9,000. They were timing out because they hit 4 hours. Did it do it on C6 or did it just C7?
So for me, I don't know if you have the same thing, but I think like I would always have a couple of replicates that seemed okay, and then
no, that's what's happening.
Yeah,
it's just garbage. It's just the 101 for every replicate ran fine. So I checked all the 101s and I was like, oh, good. They all went. So garbage.
And you ran with 3-digit seeds? That's interesting too. Because I wondered for a bit if it was my seeds.
No. I ran with the same. It was
1001.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that's one of the ones I think didn't work for me. So it'd be interesting if it's not the same seeds that's working.
I mean, it's totally different.
You did code. It's different code. Yeah, you rewrote it.
Yeah, the code is all rewritten. So. No, it's the same shit. Bullshit. Make sure I'm not being stupid.
Are you did you check? Are you checking the logs, the output logs?
Yeah, that's what I just looked at. And there's a bus error.
Oh, it's the same bus error.
Yeah. All right. This is complete and utter garbage. 164. All right. So nothing to report here.
Thanks, Mojo.
I will. What else did you want to talk about? I'll look at this some more.
Okay, no worries.
I quit. I mean, I quit. But I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So, I just think I've got to start working on a cultural evolution thing for Mike soon, and I was thinking maybe at some point I would see if, because I know you're super busy, if maybe one of these systems that we talked about that you've pretty much already got going, like if
I mean, my issue is here's the issue, and I'm not going to gild the lily, and I forget this myself. These things are not trivial and they're not easy,
right,
and like things just always go wrong, and so unless I have one sort of like work on the weekend for fun project that I'm going to be doing, but I have zero interest. So the thing is, even if we have a good idea and we're like, oh, we think if we do X, we're going to get this result. First of all, we have to get the code developed. We have to get it to work, right? And there's nothing like out of the box. It's just going to work. But then on top of that, if you don't have a good question, then I'm just running around in circles. It's like, it's the worst. And I mean, the probability that you're not, I mean, I don't know, maybe, you know, maybe your guy is good at taking anything and making it a paper, but I find that process, I find so many papers are garbage and they're a waste of space because they are not well conceived. And people will just, like, I've thrown away a couple papers over the last few years because I realized the result was trivial. It's like, no, there's nothing here. I have for A-Life right now. I had an idea for a paper. I was pursuing it for a few weeks. Nothing, more nothing, some more nothing. And I'm like, look, I'm done. I'm not gonna, I have data. I could write a paper. It would be the most boring paper anyone's ever read. I have no interest in writing it. So the issue is without a strong hypothesis going in, or, I mean, it's one thing if we ran something and we saw an interesting effect and we chased that down. Great. But that's not what we have here. And so without a strong hypothesis, I'm kind of like, no.
So for me, I'm like, I just think Mike really needs something. And at this point, I think I'd have a better feel of what I could do potentially if I just worked with something. So I was thinking I might just take one of these systems that has the potential to have, you know, like one of these other mechanisms in it. And then maybe just propose to Mike, like, Mike, let's just start off with an adaptation chance in history paper. Like, you know, let's see if this other culture has, let's hypothesize it's going to make historical effects significantly weaker, you know, because a lot of this, and just start somewhere, because for me, it's I think Mike really wants to get into that realm, and like I feel like I gotta give him something with that to start somewhere, because he's like really gung ho about it, and he's like you know, we got the Mac, right? And he's like, well, I thought that this project, that computer was gonna go to this project. And so I'm like, all right, cool. Like, if that's the deal,
Mike, that's fine. It's just you need a hypothesis. You need something for us to, you know, we need a question.
Right. But in the meantime, I'm like, I need.
The problem that I had was when I talked with him, and I was proposing a system, and I was saying, oh, we could do this thing with gut biome and say it's the inheritance of like the coevolution between the gut biome and the agents, and the gut biome can be transferred between agents. And he was like, I don't like gut biome. I don't like this. And it needs to have this, and it needs to have this, and it needs to have this. And I'm like, what's the hypothesis? You're now telling me that you don't want me to model it with a certain model, and you're telling me that you want certain specific features, but you don't have a hypothesis. And that was when I was like, I'm done.
Right.
I'm not going to run around like building all of these. It's literally like premature optimization. It's just, I'm not going to run around adding a bunch of features to software that never get used because, oh, you know, I mean, I'm not getting paid. If I was getting paid a programmer's salary, and the guy who hires me wants me to just add stuff to the code, and that's all I have to do, great. But like, I'm not getting paid.
Right.
there's no guarantee that if we run around in circles, it's going to generate a paper.
Yeah. So my thing is, I think I completely agree with everything you said, right? And I think there's a really good chance if I start down this road, Mike's going to help me get a grant to keep going down this road. And it may just be that
That's fine, but I still want to know. I mean, look, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying it's sort of like saying it's like you're saying I want to get to California, and I'm saying, do you want to fly? Do you want to take a car? Do you want to take a bus? Do you want to take a train?
If it were me today, I would literally probably I'd take whatever working version you have of something like these guys can cook this thing and get this resource easier. These guys can do the other thing.
I don't have a working version of that. I would have to write it. I started planning on how to write that, but then it was like, no, we're not going to do that. So I was like, all right, I'm not doing that. I have the host parasite thing, but that's not cultural inheritance.
Right.
It's not even horizontal gene transfer. There's no mechanism there to communicate information between agents, right? Between agents in the same species. What's transferred is the parasite. It's a host parasite system. It's not a cultural evolution system.
Yeah.
If we added a mechanism that allowed agents to share like known strategies, but that's a whole development. And in order to make it relevant, there has to be some lit review that says, well, what are we, what's the base? Like, because we can make up whatever we want. So it's like, what's the basis for the decisions that we're going to make?
Yeah, and these are tough questions to get answered when literally nobody's working on it. So
that was the thing. Like I was very clear. I can develop code, but I can't do the lit review. I can't, and I don't know if it's a relevant question. And sort of, I lost confidence because it was like, well, we'll build stuff and we'll figure out a paper to write using it. And I'm like, no. And especially now, I'm working on a couple projects for A-Life. I'm working on another paper that we were hoping to get into Gecko, but the deadline is like today, so that's not happening. And then I have my thesis I got to work on.
Yeah.
So I don't have to, right. It's about between now and a month from now. I can't even think about another project.
Oh yeah, I might just ask you to help me with making something. I'm just gonna have to start somewhere. And at this point, I don't care. Like it gets a point. Like it gets a point where it's like I feel my job's being hung over a barrel. Look, I'm just gonna work on what the dude told me to work on. Like I'm gonna be sitting here typing until. But I'm still
address the question on the table. You need to get to California. You're like, I need to get to California. I'm like, great. Do you want to take a bus? Do you want to take a train? Do you want to take a plane? Because I'm going to drive you to a different place depending on what you want to take.
My thing is, and I'm going to talk to Mike about it today, but my suggestion for him would be write another adaptation chance and history paper. It's what you do. It's what you're known for. You know how to analyze them. You know what the methods look like.
But that's not cultural inheritance.
It's what he does in the context of culture. Because then all he's got to do is get a thing that is whatever he thinks is a valid form of culture and inheritance, and then compare it to the normal system without it, right? And to me,
that's fine. That's fine. But then he's got to propose what the base system is, what the adaptation to what the change to the system is. And then what the hypothesis, what's the expected outcome?
The thing he mentioned to me last time, and it was kind of like in passing because we were talking about a bunch of other stuff too, but he was basically saying something like, it sounded like more like Mabe, because he was basically saying you take a Vita, and I think that's just what he normally references when talking about digital stuff, and then it encodes for a thing, and then that problem gets solved somewhere else, which sounds like, mapping a brain, and then the brain existing in the world, and then a thing happening, and then that coming back. So he's basically trying to get to something like, you're not directly just encoding the Avidian's program, but you're encoding a program that then does something somewhere else, right? But that's super, like you said, it's
That's
super
just
vague
indirect.
and hard to pin
And
down.
that's
It's like,
one that's super vague. That's just indirect encoding.
yeah,
Cultural inheritance has to have horizontal transfer of information. And if it's not just horizontal gene transfer, which is not cultural inheritance,
right.
then it has to be something having to do with lifetime state. Right? Horizontal gene transfer would be I get a gene from you, and that gene may simply affect my soma cells, but it may also affect my germ.
Yeah, I gotta.
Right?
I
And be
mean,
inheritable. And typically when we talk about horizontal gene transfer, we're talking about horizontal gene transfer into the germline, which now becomes an inheritable trait. If it's horizontal gene transfer into the soma line, but then you need a system where the agent can change during lifetime. And typically our systems don't allow that.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like the specifics are really gonna matter. The reason that I propose like the cooking method one is because it's a very loose model where you transfer information and you can explain it in 10 seconds. Like there are different foods in different places. There are different ways you have to cook your food so you can eat it. And you can pick that up from other agents. So if you migrate, or if the weather changes, or if the foods available change, if somebody learns it, they can pass that on to somebody else without having to produce offspring.
I think you have to go with that. I mean,
well, but that's a huge development. That's a month of development. That world is a month of development. There's no shortcut to building that world. And I mean a month if I don't do anything else.
Right.
And that's me. Good luck.
Yeah, no, I understand, but at
least for the next month, I have zero time, and even after that, I don't know because in a year and a half, they're going to kick me out. And I got the paper I've been working on for 3 freaking years, and then 2 more minimum.
Right.
And really 3 more.
Right. Which is pretty much what I'm gonna say to Mike. Like, I'd be happy to do this. You just got to make sure I've got funding to do it, and send me the machine, because at this point, it's just like. I feel like this wasn't really made clear to me before, right? But last time I talked to him,
you're in a different spot. You're his postdoc, so you're getting paid by him. You're beholden to him. But for me, it's just like I'm looking at this going like this was just gravy. And I was super clear up front. I have 0 time to do lit review. I have 0 time to check if the question is valid.
Right.
I have 0 question to know how the system should work. I need somebody else to define all those things, and I can just write the code. But as soon as I start, and I mean, the thing is, this is from experience. That host parasite system, that was a beacon class project. And I mean, the honest truth is, if we use that system, I have to go back to everyone who was in that class and say, hey, we're using that system. Do you want to get involved? I think everyone who was involved will say that they don't. It basically has nothing to do with the question. But I wrote that entire system, and I had to come up with almost every mechanism in that system because they weren't thinking of it. And so me as the guy writing the code, it was like, well, figure something out. So, okay, I'll do tag matching for this. I'll figure out the migration rates. I'll all this stuff I figured out. And at the end of the day, I wrote this giant thing. I don't know the lit review. I tried to get other people interested in it. They didn't understand the system. And so I spent, a month probably of 40-hour weeks for a thing that is really cool and generates an output. And I got a lot of experience out of it, but no paper. I'm not doing that.
Not doing that again. Yeah, I know. I'm in the same.
And I've done that on other things. I worked on another project. At least I got paid for it. But I worked on it half-time for a year.
And listen to me.
And at the end,
I'm taking the gloves off.
The researchers I was working with, they kind of changed the question slightly, which invalidated all of our data. And then because of the Beacon funding process, our 1-year progress report didn't get properly submitted, and then we didn't get approved for more Beacon funds. And then as soon as we didn't have funds, the collaborators just fell off the face of the earth. And so I had worked on that for a year and nothing came out of it. And so I'm Absolutely. Like, no, I'm not doing these speculative. I'm happy to work with someone, but they have to come to the table with basically the whole thing. And it's like, if I'm going to invest in a company, I want to be very confident it's going to work before I do it.
Right. Yeah. No, I 100% agree.
The way that you were talking about it and the way that Mike started talking about it, it seemed like, oh, he's really, he's really engaged with this. But then when we started talking about details, it was like, man, I got nothing,
Yeah, no, 100%.
He's putting it all on me. He's saying, you figure it out. You figure out something. And I'm like, no, that's not how this game works.
Yeah.
Because if I know exactly what I have to build, I can develop the pseudocode and I can figure out all the data structures. And then I just have to fill it in. And that's not so bad. And I can write all the test cases. I just have to fill it in. But as soon as there are unknowns while I'm writing the code, now I got to leave doors open. I can't test things properly because I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't have a hypothesis, so I don't know if I'm, when I run it, I'm like, well, am I getting the wrong data because I'm not meeting the hypothesis and I have an error, or am I getting the wrong data because, it's because I have an error and it's evolving. So good luck figuring it out. So I just, I mean, that's the conversation you need to have with Mike. But again, it's on you, right? Like, you're in a different position than I am.
Yeah.
I have no problem. I mean, whatever, do what you got to do, and I can help how I can help. But
yeah, I mean, that's all.
And I don't have high hopes if it's not, if it isn't, if there isn't a good plan, then I don't have high hopes. At least with the shape painting thing. The shape painting thing is something where there's a hypothesis on the table. The hypothesis has to do with origin of sexes and how, having different resources and environment, and having some mechanism that can help, like, make shape. It can help make mating types more stable. How those affect things, right? There's like some nice, simple questions there, and the system we have, like, the only bit that we don't have, because as far as I'm concerned, if we did the shape mating stuff, and then we added an extra set of conditions where we have shape mating, and then halfway through the run, we turn it off. So once they establish shapes, we turn off, not shape mating, but we turn off the food cost, and we see if they keep the shapes.
Right.
And my guess is that they will, even though there are no food costs.
Yes, because they always seem to lock into the shape mating.
Right. And if that's the case, then and then we say, well, do they need the environment? Like, is it just if they just have the mechanism, maybe that's enough. Maybe they can lock into the mechanism faster if the environment, encourages that. And if they do lock in faster and we take it out of the environment, do they keep it, right? And we expect that they will, right? And then we can look at how strong that advantage needs to be. How deep can we make the sort of intermediate, like, how bad can we make the intermediate state?
Right.
So there's a whole array of questions that I think are interesting, and there's kind of self-contained.
I totally agree with you. I mean, that's why I have that as, like, the priority for my research. And to me, our other evolutionary dynamic stuff is also very fundamental and straightforward.
Why don't you just sell them on the shape mating stuff? It's cultural. It's as cultural as anything else.
Cultural as anything else. Yeah. I mean, that's eventually what we're going to start getting to when we start getting into more complex behaviors. So I don't know. I'll talk to him. I think he genuinely believes it's a game changer. That's why he thinks this is the, how you make your name in science. And
I mean, look, the thing is, I did a little bit of research on this. I did a little bit of lit review, and there are hundreds of papers. It's not like this is an unknown corner that people aren't talking about.
Right. It's just they can't do the experiments.
Like, if you just do, I've now been on a couple projects where there's another project I worked on for 6 months, and it went absolutely nowhere. And at one point, I was really deep into it, and I was like, well, I was responsible for writing code. I was replicating what somebody was doing something in Avita. I was replicating what they were doing in Avita. I had trusted that they had everything, and it was just like, oh, I'm going to replicate it in another system because, there you go. See if we get similar results. And after doing all this development, doing all this data analysis, what ends up happening, I do a lit review and I find out that this particular topic has been studied as digital systems, first as machine learned systems, and then as evolved systems. Since like the 80s, people have been working on this thing.
Right.
And that none of that, he had already written a paper, he had written like a abstract for a conference. None of the prior papers were cited. None of the prior methods were referenced. I was like, what the hell are we doing here? This is a complete waste of time, because our work he was treating it as though no one had ever done it. And it's like, no, people have done this. I think if we're going to get in cultural evolution, somebody needs to do a deep dive on both the sort of human cultural evolution, and then whatever sort of, I don't know, like there's anything that's communication, right? Anything like plant communication, bacterial communication, the behavior of especially primates, but like crows do like teach their offspring things.
So to be honest with you, here's what I liked about it. There's a really sort of big deal in human evolution and sort of the anthropology about sort of gut brain theories. And basically the idea that cooking and different forms of food prep like reduced the pressures on the gut, right? And now you get more brain development. At the same time, I'm familiar with it. It was talked about a lot. My anthropology course, I'd have to look into it because I'm sure it's not impossible to model. But I didn't really see anything to me that was like the type of experimental evolution we do with these digital systems. So that is something I could definitely sink my teeth into, because it does directly tap into, this is basic ecology, right? Food prep, harvesting resources, reducing the cost to do so, how that leads to, sympatric speciation or some of these other questions, like, is obvious. And I kind of think it's better to start there. In other words, that stuff might be easier than even more algorithmic or computational approaches, which are not going to resonate as well with biologist people, right? We're trying to talk to biologists, food prep, that type of stuff. So I don't know, but yeah, that's what I feel like I'm going to have to do, right? I'm going to have to like start developing and working on things, and then hopefully Mike's excited about that, and that buys us time to mature the research agenda.
I mean, however you want to skin the cat, like it's all good.
Because I'm with you, because I see that that's the problem, right? Without them giving us a clear direction to start, where do you even go with your lit review, right? And so my thing is, if I can get them on something like this, I at least know where to start the lit review. I at least know what the relevant fields are, what the bigger hypotheses are, and then we can start seeing, has anybody looked into this particular? At least it's a way to go, right? And then the reason I suggest to him to do something akin based to what he already does is, one, it's going to be easier for him to get that stuff published. It's going to be able to do methods and analysis that people in the community are familiar with, because he's still going to be trying to sell this to bugs people, essentially, right? And so I think you start with something that's like, hey, we did this, we're looking at its effects on historical contingency or rates of adaptation in new environments or something like that, just very basic stuff. But all the while, we're starting to work through some of this system. So now the system doesn't have to be doing something radical, right? It just has to be a useful system to answer questions we kind of already answer, but now we'll get a little bit more into it and see what's there, and then we can start to bring out some bigger questions.
This all sounds good. That's all fine. Just has to be done. look, two things. One, you got to go.
Yeah.
Two, I'm curious if I'm hesitant to suggest this, but it would be an interesting conversation. If you wanted to reach out to Gustick Gibbon and see if they wanted to have a conversation with us about this, and what would be an interesting question from their point of view
about cultural evolution.
Yeah, because they're all about hominid evolution, and cultural evolution is like critical to understanding that. And they might find this. They're probably not going to get back to us. I don't know. Maybe they will get back. Maybe you're big enough.
Super interesting. I mean,
but like just taking a meeting with them and being like, look, no idea if this goes anywhere, but like, we're interested in cultural evolution, and if we could communicate like the limitations of the kind of system we build, but also its actual evolution, and if there are sort of basic questions, what would the questions even be if you had access to a system like this? What question would you ask?
All right, I think it's worth a shot. I can definitely reach out. Derek and I are trying to reach out to her for some other stuff anyway, for some like evolutionary streams and stuff. So, I can definitely ask for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Worst case they say no. So.
But it also might clue us into what are some questions people can communicate about. But yeah, let me get out of here so I'm not late to my meeting with Mike. Appreciate you guys.
I'm not trying to be totally negative. I'm just
No, you're trying to be realistic. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. No, it's good. I'm glad we got to chat about it. Cliff, we'll see you on Wednesday.
All right. Cool.
All right, gang. Hopefully I'll be back later on, and I'll see you then. In the name of the Darwin, the Dawkins, and the Christopher Hitchens. Science bless you all. Poof.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights when they been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the hell's not a home. Sunshine cause you heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you